Oh, channel update. Last week, I was notified that a comment I had left had exceeded the community guidelines or some such. It probably did. It's also the truth, but that's not why it exceeded the guidelines. Or I should say the fact that it was true was not what was against the guidelines. What was true? Stating it goes against guidelines. I personally think that it is kind of goofy that in a country founded on a revolution of liberty, the culture has come to a point where it is enforceably on platforms, not legally, but on platforms. Your access to any and all things interesting outside of what you have in the room with you. It is enforceable that you don't really talk about the framework of all of that we live in was founded on that. Not only that, contains within it kind of a in between the lines prescription for what to do. And like our justice system has the death penalty. People who are guilty of certain types of seditious treason and conspiracy might get the death penalty. And I suggested that somebody deserved a death penalty. I didn't say should be killed. But anyways. So my videos have not been viewed. This video may not be viewed. Or if it is, it's only going to be viewed by somebody who's reviewing it or whatever. Maybe a couple people might seek me out. Notifications may go off. If anyone has me on notifications, I don't know if anybody does. So Monday, I was able to source the correct brake hoses for my truck, for the front. Began the process of moving through that a little bit. Paused for a day to work. The next day after that, decided to get about the rear suspension on the car. It's getting bad. But it's good now, but it was getting bad then. So Wednesday, I had to get necessary tools and parts. A couple things were on order to arrive the next day, which is today. And a couple other things going to be arriving in about a week. Then it rained a little bit, but not enough to impact anything seriously. And today, using 2 jacks, as well as jack stands, able to replace the strut and spring and mount, called a quick strut, single unit, on both sides of the rear without a second set of hands. Replace the anti-sway bar as well as the links and the bushings and the brackets. After the fact, definitely turned out to be not only a noticeable improvement, but also they get worn out over time, and especially when the car's squat and it's kind of it's a thing that goes like this, and when the wheels squat, it gets pulled out a bit, and over time it stretches into that bend. So I got a fresh one, fresh struts, suspension's all good. I'm waiting on the trailing arms, which are from the rear of the unibody at the wheel well. There's a bracket that bolts up. The bracket's got kind of a hinge, and on that hinge is the trailing arm that goes back and connects to the, maybe it's still called a knuckle, but there's a piece of metal that's got the bearing in it. It's got all the other arms and things that reach and hold it in place attached to it, including the strut. And it goes to that. And the ones that came on the car are clearly the original ones that came on the car, and those are stamped corrugated steel, which is kind of basically a V shape with a big bolt through one end, big bolt through the other end. And those do tend to bend over time. Mine are definitely a little wonky. The new ones I'm getting are tubular. Tubular, dude. Tubular steel is stronger. So I will, and I have new brackets already. So I'd also purchased, I had to purchase the rear struts. I've got a used set of front struts that I'm debating putting on yet, but I also have to do the sway bar links and bushings on the front, but that one I think will be much simpler to do. Basically what I did on this thing today was I jacked up the car, I put a jack stand in a safe location, and having lowered the jack, pulled the jack out, removed the tire, removed the sway bar link, loosened all the bolts on, or all the nuts on the top, and I did the other side too because it was still sitting on the wheel. So I'm like reaching up under into the like full extension, bent over, reaching into the trunk of the car, and got those loose. Ended up making it really easy to do the other side that way, and I hadn't thought of it in this way, and it's just, now I know better. Having done that, I realized that I was going to have to take the caliper off the bracket from the brakes to be able to get at the lower nut for the strut mounting to the knuckle thing. So I did that, got those loose, pounded out this was the point at which I then loosened the top nut, and I should have done it first because it turns out that with the jack underneath of it, and at the right angle, you don't even really have to apply that much to tap the bolts out. It's very neutral once it's disconnected from the top and the weight of the car. So anyways, I did that. I got those out. At that point, decided it was time to begin removing the anti-sway bar and the brackets. So I got at that. It was a little bit of a hassle because the bolt that holds it in place has a little stamped steel clip that holds it on with a little arm so that it turns and it blocks itself against. It's like a self wrench, so you don't have to put a wrench on it, and you spin it and it turns. And I didn't know that at first. And once I realized, I was like, okay, this is cool. The other one is, number one, a 15 millimeter, which now I have plenty of, but in every other experience in years past, I've had always issues with losing my 15 millimeter. Or wherever I'm working, not having a 15 millimeter, because they always get lost. Or then someone else goes and takes one. So the issue was my 15 millimeter socket was not quite deep enough. And so I had to kind of fiddle with it to get it to work, but I did get the nut loosened and then get the thing off. It was pretty simple. Took the sway bar off because the other link was the newer one that I'd replaced recently, like less than a year ago. And I was just doing them all fresh anyway, but I was like, I'm going to get them all off. It's a good thing I did because then it just gave me enough of the extra nut for mounting those, because that's the exact same nut as what is used on the, and thread pitch and everything, on the sway bar bushing bracket, the aforementioned funky screw with the self wrench. So I had plenty of them. Plus I found some spare extra ones, which was great. All the right size. Those were all in my toolbox. So I got that off of the other link, took that down and out of the vehicle. I purchased the links and bushings and brackets at the parts store as separate items. Then when I got the sway bar in this afternoon and then went to commence the job, come to find out that it had sway bar links and bushings and brackets as well. It just didn't have the second nut for each of the threaded things on it. So it's like you're going to have to use one of your own. So like I said, I just found a whole spare cache of them. I had plenty for everything. That was awesome. I got that kind of hooked back in as I put the strut in on the passenger side first, where I'd started. I got that up in, secured the top, got the bolts in very easily with the use of my old jack. Now that I had 2 jacks available. This comes into play later rather than using the new one, which is kind of big and unwieldy. So I made the mistake of using the impact gun to speed the process because of the angle of things and the bunch of clunky stuff that you're hitting with the ratchet handle, that I was going to use the gun to shoot the screw in once I had it started. But what ended up happening was it just kept turning and ultimately ended up like shearing off the screw in the little cup socket. Now, at this point in the story, I convey to you proof of the existence of a benevolent God that intervenes in people's lives. Behold, the last time I did work at the top of the driveway was replacing this particular brake caliper and bracket. Now, I myself managed to save the extra, and maybe the inspiration was from somewhere else. And I'm not trying to be like, it was all me. I saved the caliper pin screws, which I had just broken one I mentioned. I saved 2 of those, so I had a spare. 2 days ago, heading out to work, on the ground underneath where the tires went, where my car goes, was one of these little slide out sockets that contains within the springy caliper pin movement. And it was crusted in dirt. It was buried by being run over by a car. It had wintered there because the brake replacement took place in like late November, early December. Remember, we didn't have snow at Christmas. This was done kind of on an emergency basis, I think in November. So anyways, it had been there since then, stuck in the ground. It survived the winter, it functioned, it was everything I needed because the end of the screw that was broken off. And while it was casually lost or whatever, I found it 2 days ago as I was getting into this job and thought, haha, that's funny, junk pile. But thankfully was able to remember where it landed on the junk pile when I realized I needed it. That's crazy. That's a thanks God. Wow. Because that's not a random happenstance. As far as I knew, all the parts of the previous caliper were on the caliper when they went with the core. And this is the only caliper I've replaced on that side where that would have fallen. So, don't tell me there's not a higher power that sometimes just goes, boom, there you go. Because I didn't have to call anyone. I was able to get the thing done. I was able to replace this part easily and continue on about my way. I got all that done. I got the link attached to the sway bar, and I got the sway bar roughly in place, but able to be moved because I'd learned that it needed to be removed to make the removal of the strut from the tower that much easier. So this time, I went to jack the car up to then place a jack stand and realized that I was crushing a bad spot on the subframe. So I lowered the car, moved the jack, which now I'm using the big heavy new one. Low profile, long reach, able to get where I need it to go, and has a nice broad base. This is perfect for what I'm doing. And I slowly lift the car at the point I was going to put the jack stand, and it's good. That part is not bad. The other part is it's a different segment, different material. So this spot works, but no jack stand here. I'm still jack standed on the other side of the car, so I put the wheel on, tighten those down. Everything is connected on that side. Everything's tightened up. Everything is good on that side. But I'm still on the stand because I want it to be up and level. So I get the other one up. I get having already taken the tops off, the nuts off of the above the tower in the trunk. As soon as I lifted it up, the whole wheel came down. I had the lug nuts off already, but I actually ended up having to kind of wiggle and move it, and it was trying to be stuck on this wheel for some reason. It didn't want to come off, just a little tight or something. So I bopped it and jumbled it and finally got it off, managed to get the tire out of the way, and the entire assembly sinks down to the full distance that the suspension arms allow it to go down. So I get the other jack. So like I said, it's good to have two jacks. I got the new one holding the car up. I got the old one, just smaller, but not as low profile, so it won't fit under my car. It works for the truck. I get it. It's just a perfect height to pump, and it's holding the thing where it needs to be. I take the brake caliper off. I remove the burnout. I remove the sway bar link from the sway bar, and I'm able to get, I remove the sway bar link from the strut. The strut has already come down because of the thing sinking. I have to be careful lifting it up that I don't mess up the tower. Just enough movement to get it up so it's not stressing the bottom on these arms. So I get the caliper off, a side sitting on the trailing arm. I get the bolts out. I tap them very easily because of having the jack in place. Again, with the thing loosened on top, I realized we're bringing it down that way. The only thing I should have done was got the wheel off. Like get the lugs, make sure the wheel is loose as I'm lifting it because that thing's sunk. So I get it underneath. On both sides with having the wheel off and using the jack on the bottom, I'm resting the brake disc on the jack contact point, and I'm using a lug nut tightened onto the brake disc to keep the disc from wobbling. So I did this. And so I've got the thing down. I've got the sway bar completely out now. Able to just wiggle the thing, knock it back a couple times, just gentle taps on the old strut, and it comes right off of that knuckle. I get the thing down, I angle it, it's out, cool, good to go. I get the other one. It's a little finicky getting in. It gets up there. I get it connected on one bolt, as I did on the other side. I didn't describe this. I connect the bottom bolt back into the strut on the knuckle. I then position it to the holes and gently raise the jack till I get the holes up, and then I can start the nuts on those. As soon as the nuts are started, I'm going to tighten them. I'm going to pull that whole thing up, and it's just going to suspend the wheel apparatus assembly right where it's supposed to be. So I get that up in, same as I did the other side. Sorry, I forgot to describe it. At least you're not hearing it twice. And let's see. Having tightened that, got both of the bolts in, both of the nuts through the knuckle and the strut, tightened them up good. Sway bars in place, had to mount the bracket, get that tightened in, learn from the first one. This one I had a slightly longer nut. That made the difference. A short socket with a long grip on the nut is just as good as a short nut with a long socket. So I get this thing on, I get everything connected good and tight, tightened up, and it's all on and in. Uneventful. Got everything back on, tightened up, good to go. Left the trunk completely empty, everything out of the side of the driveway moved from, so I can back out, made sure everything's good and tight. By the way, also, I don't know how well it shows here. This is not shadow. This dark side right here on the nail. I have a blood blister bruise thing going on. On the passenger side, when I was putting the, trying to use my not long enough socket with a short nut to get the thing tightened, ended up losing grip on I think the square drive came out of the socket. Basically, it was pushed too far. It slipped out, winged my thumb. I did a slap bass thumb tap, right? Blah! Except it was on the muffler. So, yeah, that sucked. So, anyways, that being the only real injury, I think, of the whole thing, scraped myself on the staples of the boxes that the struts came in as I was disposing of all the trash and moving things away from the work site and spare parts and whatnot going into the truck. I don't think that counts. That's like the only thing that actually drew blood was this. Where'd it go? You can barely see it. Scratch on the back of my hand right here. That's it. So anyways, yeah, I drove to town. Turned out, you can, the way it works is if you don't use a part and it's unopened in the package, you can 100% return it for a refund at the parts store. So I took the parts back and returned them for the refund. It was a cash purchase. I'm not going to say how much it was. It didn't hurt because this is an investment and it's a culmination of things that I should have done over time that I didn't. Now that I had to drop a chunk on a good jack to be able to work on this car appropriately without some weird, I got to back the car. What I was doing, the previous pre-wintertime blizzard snowstorm, how I was doing this was I had two pieces of wood about this long. Well, one was this long and one was this long. And it was like a piece of deck board and a piece of 2x6. And I would put these behind the wheel that I was going to be working on the wheel well of it, back it up so that there was enough room from the clearance under the car to get my old jack underneath. This is why I needed to get a new jack. The difference is the old jack was one that cost like $100 at a time when I really only had $100, but I needed a jack. So the solution was to drive onto little pieces of wood like a ramp to be able to get it up high enough to get the jack under it. And then you had to make sure to have those things under the wheel when you put the tire back on so that you can lower it onto those. So this was part of the process prior to this. The difference is instead of a $100 jack, it's more of a $260 after-tax jack at a time when I, at this point, can kind of afford that. So it's an investment. And everything I did was an investment because now the jiggly, shaky, driving with your ass going like this down the road, that's a let's get pulled over kind of thing. That's a people seeing that driving up to their house. Oh my God, did they ruin my pizza? Or what's this guy spending his money on? Should I tip him? Well, it's a thing where the time and the weather and the circumstance involving needing to get a good jack were all not in place yet. And I finally got them all in place and ba-boom, did the thing. I'm kind of proud of myself because, like I said, I did this all by myself. Nothing catastrophic happened. I was able to remedy a situation that I put myself in, making a mistake. Haste makes waste. Truth. And ultimately was able to take the refund as well as a today only 20% discount coupon for having done a return with cash. They do this. That I got a 20% discount on rear brake pads for my truck, which I'm not 100% sure if the ones that are on it are like what stage they're in. I thought they were good. I think I've made the assumption they were good. There have been other things on this truck that I've made assumptions about that I've been wrong about. So I wanted to make sure I had those. And so I paid like 63 instead of like 72. I still have some cash back here. Eventually can go back in the bank or something. But anyway, so the point is, I've got cores to return when I get these brakes going on the truck too. I have dropped some money on this. And I believe it's good money and a good investment because this is going to give me the ability to have some limited use of my truck until I can figure out what it's going to take on the frame rail. But it can be moved. The car can be parked at the bottom of the driveway, worked on at the bottom of the driveway, which is such less. This is even more of a how fast I can get things done, how conveniently I can work when I'm right next to the garage and not a 30-second walk to the toolbox and back 30 seconds. If I'm hustling, I am in my mid 40s, by the way. So this is, I'm working toward this as a goal. Now, as I was doing all of this, of which I've just described, becoming very proud of myself, at least for that. This is not hubris pride. This is just like, I'm glad I did it. I'm glad it's finally done. I'm glad I did it right. I'm glad that anything that happened that went wrong, I didn't have to call on help. I was able to do a thing. So for me, this is empowering. As I was doing this, I was also listening to a very, very fascinating commentary by a lawyer who is currently practicing, who was listening to and watching the hearing as to whether or not the lead prosecutor and district attorney in Fulton County should be disqualified from their RICO case against Donald Trump. And what was really revealed in it, there was a very lot. It was a long, arduous, like it was probably a good 8+ hours of court business and testimony. Lots of testimony. Some bombshell testimony. Some shade being thrown. Some, if you know how to read people and know what you're looking at, this is some holy moly kind of stuff. There's a tremendous amount of corruption on the county level at that place. Makes you wonder about other places too. Everybody should be interested in their government being transparent and fair and not misappropriating their funds or using the office for political purposes, pursuing some things and not pursuing other things, for example, as a prosecutor. Because this level of corruption that was just hinted at, they just brushed up against enough for the judge to kind of have already made his mind up. Probably going to be disqualified tomorrow, but there's a lot more stuff to do. So this lawyer's name was Dani On. Her channel is Dani On Direct, DaniAhn, and then Direct. I was subscribed to her since I think the Rittenhouse case. She was on one of the lawyer panels on his day show back when things were not all messed up on that guy's channel. Meteoric success, rise and fall. Anyways, this lady had a nice couple hundred people in her chat, was able to interact with the audience. It was great. I had a direct interaction regarding some stuff that was going on. This district attorney was called as a witness. It's a hearing, not a trial. The rules are different. The witness is able to rant and ramble if they want, and there was a whole bunch of crap thrown out and deflection, but this lady implied that when they were saying she had a romantic relationship, she says, no, I had a romantic relationship with him from this date to this date after the fact, but not before and not starting with. But ultimately was also admitting that previous to hiring this dude, he had not only been her mentor, but had eventually been a physical lover as well. But she was distinguishing between having sex with a person and having a romantic relationship with a person. And it sounded like she was kind of putting him ipso post facto in the friend zone. But also, she mentioned at one point they were talking about, so your sexual relationship or your romantic relationship, and I think it was like both, but during this time was, at this time as well, they're trying to prove an inappropriate relationship. Well, it turns out that he'd had some sort of cancer, had cancer treatment during the pandemic, kept himself in a sterile environment if at all possible, and then eventually, though, kind of waned out of that. But the underlying thing is that there was a definite more than just, having a drink at the bar after a day at the office kind of thing between these two. But then at one point she points out that at a specific time frame they're referring to, that they were talking about her and him having sex or some such, that she implied that was simply not possible due to the type and nature of cancer that he had and the treatment at the time. And then the chat and everybody in that was, this is of course much later. I've mainly for the afternoon just was listening to testimony with occasional pauses, go backs, and it was kind of droll for a minute, some interesting things. She basically implied that most likely this guy had testicular cancer and had lost a testicle in the process of getting past it. And because the way she said, I don't want to emasculate a man or whatever, and there was a lot of conversation and things back and forth with the attorneys that kind of brought out that she doesn't like men. She also doesn't like women. Like it's weird. This lady is some kind of weird sexist. But she accused him of being like some kind of male chauvinist. He's something about the best a woman could do for me is make a sandwich. And it's like, okay, that could be taken out of context. And even if he did say it, it contradicts all the other statements of loyalty and admiration that she says she has for him. Hence why she hired him for this lead prosecutor gig. But ultimately, it looks like he may be embezzling, involved in tax fraud personally, but embezzling from the office in some kind of tandem with the DA and other people. Somebody that complained about the issues, got forced to quit, basically, was a witness. They completely omitted their personal relationship and or romantic/sexual relationship that had happened or not happened, on and off. Well, it did happen, but there was on and off of what she considered what, versus she kept talking about he'd consider a romantic. He's a man. This whole like super like, it's weird how this lady thinks. So basically, this lady had dated him. She had gone on trips with him where he paid, and then she claimed to have paid her back, but there's no receipts to prove that this happened. If he paid for them and he's a contractor, which he was, that's a gift that he's not allowed to give to her as a contractor. So there's a bunch of things in here that imply that there may be felonies that can be charged. Certainly, misappropriation of public funds is involved, as well as individuals potentially committing tax fraud and embezzling from public funds. This was all on display as I was listening to this commentator lawyer lady, calls herself Lafrodite. I can see why. So doing this while working on the vehicle, and then at the end of it, sitting down, cleaned up, having a cigarette, eating some popcorn, watching this thing, literally eating popcorn. And it comes out, all of this stuff at the culmination of it, like, let's put this all together. So the point that she had made, which is very important, is that this affects all of us. It's not just that county. It affects all of us. The question has to be, what kind of faith does anybody have in the legal system? This affects people's decision-making. This affects a lot of stuff about people's lives. And then when the court system can be seen to be clearly politically prosecuting things, that this could get a lot of cases thrown out as well, because the court system, justice is blind. They're not supposed to be partisan. And all of this is on display clearly for anyone to see. It was live streamed in a state courtroom, as is the law. And I got to say, the judge was rational, but not assertive in the slightest. Speaking of no balls, there were a number of times that the DA, as a witness under oath, accused the plaintiff's side of, specifically the plaintiff's lawyers, of lying in filings. Was on the verge of, like, flat out called people liars, on the verge of name calling, and the judge did no censure, did no threats of contempt or anything else. It was really weird. And then after that outburst, there was a 5-minute break. The attorneys met with her in the restroom, apparently, and then they came back out, and the judge basically just said, we are not going to talk over each other. And at that point, became a little more interactive with the witness and the attorneys as far as mediating the meaning of questions and statements so that they could stop bickering, basically, like having to kind of go between like that. It was really weird. But the estimation most people seem to have right now is that the judge is probably going to disqualify both of them from the case. That means somebody else may take it up, but also apparently somebody else may have the option of saying this is not worth pursuing at this time. They've got backlogs and other things. They've got victim funds that the money that's being used was basically taken before it could be put into, before it was appropriated for that or whatever. However. But, yeah, it's messed up down there. These people that are coming against Donald Trump in court are the ones who are corrupt. They are guilty of the things that they are accusing him of. So basically, government people, organization, embezzlement, tax fraud, misappropriation of funds, and partisan political prosecutions. It's likely that things that come to light under oath that are demonstrated and or ruled to have occurred within a hearing like this could be referable to law enforcement. But the question is, will the DOJ do anything? But the real thing is that people have seen this happen now. Pending what happens tomorrow and what, it's like people as a whole, the masses, the folks that typically just, work and try and pay their bills and shop for shit and buy stuff and watch shows and whatever, and don't really think about the political or anything else, are going to be forced to see what either their inaction or their default vote for a particular side, just because the folks on the TV sets and in all the advertisements and all the culture, TV, movies, and music tend to all act like this other side is bad guys. We got to go vote for the good guys. Are tricking all these people into voting for them, or just not voting, just not participating, not caring. It's not, I'm not voting because I refuse, I protest, I have a reason. It's, I'm not voting because I just don't think about it. Those people are all going to be forced to see that the entirety of the system that they live in is hogwash. And when this occurs is when you have questions about the consent of the governed, which I've spoken on before. And ultimately, we're looking at the other half, the uneven application of the law, justice not being just necessarily for some time. This erodes faith in the system. So you have eroded faith. You have the people being like, why should I follow that? You have then attempts to enforce the law nonetheless. You also have people in other places that say, see what they're doing? They're letting all this crap happen. I can get away with whatever I want. And they just go and do without consequence. Meanwhile, law enforcement takes mostly to the people who are moving toward more constitutional civil disobedience, or, being more vocal about, you have no right. They'll go after those people, but they won't necessarily go after the people that just decide they can get away with whatever. That's what's, I think, potentially on the horizon. I don't know that it has to happen, but it certainly could happen because everything we're seeing. Now, on top of this, remember that all this crazy crap is going on because somebody who isn't one of the inside got in and he's trying to get back in, and they don't want him back in. But it's more than that. It is actually more about they don't want everyone, including all of those non-voters, default voters, etc. They don't want anyone to realize that it's all connected to things like Epstein. And all these people are corrupt, whether it's somebody has dirt on them because of some really creepy stuff, or just they work in the system, they facilitate that not getting exposed, and at the same time they embezzle, tax fraud, misappropriate funds, etc., while politically prosecuting people to try and remain in power. That they're only really fighting this hard to remain in power because I think they are afraid that they're going to be exposed. And at that point, they won't be able to work. They won't be able to survive. If they're smart and have money, maybe. But one of the things that D.A. Willis was complaining about on the stand today was that she had to move out of South Fulton County because of threats on her safety at her domicile, supposedly. But she had to move out of there and into a condo somewhere else. The sun is set to have some interesting possibilities the next couple of days. There could be some serious geomagnetic proton storms. There's a very serious sunspot that is moving into a position just over the edge of the sun, where the way that the magnetic fields run in the solar system, it kind of arcs back and directly connects with Earth at that point. And this is the sunspot that has been throwing out X flares this past week. So we're right in the bullseye of the crosshairs at this time for the next couple of days on the space weather. Not sure what else I got. Oh yeah, so on the way home from the test drive into town, during which I also returned the parts that I didn't need for some money and bought a thing I may need later, and headed back, there was a pillar of fire. A pillar of fire is a transient atmospheric illumination event where something happens with the sun being just at or below the horizon, or in this case, the artificial horizon of the hills in the distance, to the point that the scattering of light along the solar ecliptic creates what looks like a vertical section of brighter light caused by clouds, haze, moisture, etc., as well as the redshift effect of the sunset being over the horizon, having the thickest area of atmosphere between the sun and you. And it refracts a lot more of the blue light that way. I should say refracts more red than blue. So anyways, I believe I can show on here. I had replaced my phone recently with an identical model, and it had not thought to check the camera settings. And so it actually had an auto stabilizer on, so when your hand movements and whatever, what that actually does is it basically causes your camera to record like this. And if you just have it on and hold it still does this to whatever you're showing. So then if I was to run a stabilizer on that, it would crop down from the full screen, apparently, to about like this, and in a bit to the most common area of where that movement seemed to show something that was being focused on, a common thing that can then be held still while everything else moves around it, but you've already got the picture moving around it, so you can hold it still, if that makes sense. So this is what I was able to get. You can see right there. Oh, of course. You can see that it goes all the way to this cloud, basically, but there's some kind of haze underneath. So these are a couple of accidental stills because to this day, the the phone that I'm recording this on, the camera app starts off set to take a photo out of the front-facing camera. So if I hit that and think it's on video, forget about that, have to hit video part and hit record, it actually just takes a picture. And so I did accidentally take a picture of it twice, so I was able to get that. I have 3 short videos that are on this channel now already that basically just the whatever it is, an AI or however it is that this program does it, it was on. It thought that, so it'd be like this. I am clearly the subject of the video. Throughout the video, I am the common point in the center, right? So if the camera's doing this the whole time, it's going to try and at least keep it steady relative to me, because clearly that's it, right? But let's say instead it thought that like that line in the ceiling or like that shadow was what was being focused on. So then it starts to do this, where I'm actually, as I'm recording, zooming in on like this. Okay, so let's say this is the pillar of fire. I've zoomed into this, but it thinks that this shadow is what it is. And so it takes the zoom like this, even though the full frame, as I recorded it, was on center. That is what happened. So that is now off. It's an interesting thing that I am going to play with at some point, because I'm going to figure out how to set the point of focus and try and identify an object within the frame for it to lock onto for that. Because my understanding, I guess there's got to be a lot more visible field than what the phone screen is showing as I'm recording. There's got to be a much, much larger field from which it takes to put that in. But somehow, even though on the original recordings, it did it too. And on the stabilized ones, it's all the same. But as I zoomed in, as I was recording, the pillar of fire was dead center in the vertical frame. Dead center the entire time. I kept it in the center. And you'll watch these shorts and be like, what in the crap just happened here? It takes this, like, you see that? Let's say that's what should be in the total dead center, and zoomed in so that it takes up, like, over half of the vertical screen. Okay, so it'd be like that, right? For half the vert on this one, right? Except that this is supposed to be this in the center of the frame. And this is all you're getting. That's what it did. One time it was on a hillside. One time it was on this particular tree off in the distance, even though that was nowhere near as bright, vibrant, or detailed as the light. So I don't know if it just algorithmically identified sky. Who knows? So anyways, that happened on the way back. I did manage to get a little bit of decent footage on part 3 because I walked around and showed the whole field first. I did this not realizing that it was going to do that when I finished recording. I hadn't viewed the videos. But yeah, so it was gorgeous, and I was going to do the front sway bar links and bushings really quick, since this jack works well, and I know where to lift the car in the front, all this other stuff. But as soon as the sun went behind the clouds, it dropped like 10 degrees, and I was like, yeah, not done. So I ended up cleaning up the entire site, picked everything else up that was going to be stored in the car, everything that was going to be stored back down at the bottom of the driveway, and very carefully drove down the driveway with these 2 quick strut boxes full of the things that needed to be moved. So that way I saved trips. So I got that down, got it all stowed and put away, brought the jack down, and pretty much was done after that. Came in here and continued watching the end of the testimony, took a shower, and actually then I just kind of watched Timcast IRL because they shredded Congress for like 2 hours straight. It was amazing. So I got to watch a corrupt DA get exposed. I got to watch the lead prosecutor on the RICO case against Trump be shown to be anything but the man for the job. And I'll be honest, I think she picked the guy to do the thing on the case because he's kind of also similar resemblance to George Floyd, facial type thing. I just noticed it, and I was like, wow. He could play him in the biopic. You'd be like, they didn't even have to use makeup. Wow. Political. The guy has no experience in that field. Why did she pick him? Oh, he was a mentor, a colleague, but he had no experience in this field of law. Very interesting stuff. So that was my day. I was able to listen to commentary on all of that while doing a thing all by myself. Got some of my money back. Got something else I'm going to need. Should be ready to go for tomorrow. And picked up my mess. No trash was left to blow around. Yeah, that's all I got. This has been a channel update. I've got wood to collect in the woods at some point, but this vehicle stuff's a priority. The weather's going to be such that I think it'll be fine no matter what for the next couple of months. And any spare time I get to go start working on processing wood on my hillside from the fallen branches and such, it'll be able to get done. And on the feral kittens front, I have not seen them. Their mother has not been around that I've seen. Maybe they've been here, but I haven't seen them. I have seen the scouty little, looks like a gray male version of my April cat here. A little bit of a saddleback, a lot of white on the stomach, half and half, gray tabby, tritone, like white, black, and gray. Very interesting. A little bit of blue cat, I think. I've seen that one. That's the one that nobody's ever going to catch, apparently. And these other ones, I don't know what has gone on. I hope they're well. That's been a pretty exhaustive update on all things related to anything I cover on this channel. Yeah,